Everyone, well, I'm back again, and as usual, I'm sitting in my favorite little nook here. As soon as the weather gets a little nicer, I'm going to start moving around a little bit more here with the laptop and get outside where I can get some fresh air and some sunshine. However, having said that to you, I was kind of rolling around here again this morning. I've got a whole pile of request videos here, but one kind of popped in my mind that I'm just going to kind of throw out there and see where it takes me kind of thing, and if it goes okay, I'll put it up. If it doesn't, well, you won't see it. And that is the topic of Ascension, which I think would be of interest to a lot of people because so many of us are going through so many different kinds of symptoms, bodily, mentally, emotionally, physically. There must be some of us that are speculating as to what is the end outcome of where all of this is going. Besides the fact of having a very heightened state of consciousness that's no longer limited to expressing itself just in a physical vehicle. And prior to this, what we basically had on the planet is, just as I mentioned, we've had a state of consciousness based on imprints and belief systems and whatever else that was restricted to and limited to a level of consciousness that manifested in the physical body. What's been going on with this evolutionary process is we're finding out now, for example, people can now separate a portion of their consciousness and go to a different place. People can now separate their consciousness from their body and actually experience jumping into or blending or merging with someone else's body. And in most cases, these are not something that's initiated consciously yet. And also what's happened is we have, through experiences in dream state training, we are broadening our horizons when it comes to awareness. Now, when I'm talking about awareness, I'm talking about field of view or perspective from the individual's state of being or state of mind. Mind being the actual facilitator of consciousness that is and has been evolving through this evolutionary process and has now reached a state of what I'm going to call, in varying degrees, in different people's at different levels of awareness and awakening of consciousness, able to express in that particular way. So ultimately it comes down to the factor of, if we're now functioning in general terms, a 12 chakra system, and that 12 chakra system has assimilated the consciousness of the 7 chakra system, refined it to a point of now expressing into different dimensions and realities, because before the 7 chakra system was simply limited to a certain level of consciousness and it couldn't go any further. Since the evolutionary process has now bestowed a 12 chakra system to contain the consciousness that we're going to arrive at, then ultimately somewhere along the line something has to happen to the body. And the body symptoms are something that I have noticed taking place with a lot of people lately. And the idea here is this is ascension has to be completed by each individual based on their individuality and how they have evolved through the process that I've been talking about. And I actually see now that there are a few other people who are actually catching on to what I've been saying for the last 10 years, is it's a process of evolution that we're going through with subtitles all attached to it that anchor us still in 3-dimensional reality. And one of those subtitles is the very popular one called Twin Flames. And that is also nothing more than a process of going to an individual ascension to a higher level of consciousness. Now, it needs to be understood also that levels of consciousness that are attained by the individual can only be expressed to the level that which they call the soul or the higher self can manifest in physical reality based on the overall soul growth of that individual. Having said that to you, what takes place next is everyone has pre-recorded within their consciousness entering in to this particular sojourn, if you will, what they hope to accomplish in this particular lifeline that they're living. There have been placed in some of these individuals limitations or filters, if you want to put it that way, that will only allow them to achieve a certain level of consciousness based on the overall progression of their soul growth. Now, another area that I wanted to touch upon here is this also, is we have in our society, at this particular point, we have people who study personality traits. We have people who study the psychological makeup of individuals, and they attribute certain tendencies of personalities. For example, one of the most popular ones right now today is the narcissist tendency, which simply means a control freak, all right? That's all it really means. It's just a very flashy name for it. And there's all kinds of social implications, as it were, that are indicative of presenting that through a soul group or a bloodline. So what happens is if you take that one narcissist and you take someone who has been sexually abused, what's the difference? Well, the difference is obvious because it's two different expressions or two different venues or avenues of a stream of consciousness that's gone in a certain direction. And where does the point of origin of that particular state of consciousness start from? So when you take those two extremes, such as that, and you look at them and you say, can anything be done with this type of limitation that has been placed upon an individual? And in most cases, it would be said that it was something that has been inherited or passed down through their family tree or their bloodline. And whenever I see that, I see the old tendency of analyzing the evolutionary process from 10 and 20 and 30-year-old points of view and perspectives that are no longer applicable. What the evolutionary process is doing, and is still doing at this particular point, is changing the consciousness on a daily, a monthly basis as we go on. So in fact, by the time what is coming out now in understanding of the process, and it's being given as information verbally and expressed that way, it's already 10 years redundant. So what's happening is the verbal expression of information that is being given to explain some of these things is the filtered down version in three-dimensional reality of an expression of something that goes on, and it has really nothing to do with ascension. Excuse me. T. What's the most important thing to remember about ascension is each individual must go through a process. That process at this point is not predetermined as to its outcome. The opinion of a great many is that the only way for true ascension to happen is if the individual leaves and take the body with him or her. Oh, I don't follow that philosophy at all, because I believe that the process of ascension has already been completed almost in a lot of individuals while they've been going through the process itself. And actually, to leave and take the body with you is not necessary. And the other thing is this, and this I don't think has been thought about by a lot of people. If you can imagine, and this is the hypothetical situation here, if you will, for lack of a better expression. Remember, this is just a fun video. This is just my opinion, my feeling, my intuition, a combination of a whole pile of things. So this is just a fun video. Nothing important about it. And don't take me seriously, all right? But here's another thing that I was laying in bed this morning, I'm meditating, and I'm getting little bits and pieces about the ascension process, and I'm saying to myself, well, that's wonderful. You know, if we're going to have a whole pile of people that's somewhere along the line who are going to ascend and are going to take the body with them, that's going to create a lot of problems. So let's assume, hypothetically, in 2025, we're going to have, well, let's pick a wild and woolly figure here. We're going to have, because the evolutionary process has really refined and tooled a lot of individuals, and the molecular structure of the body has changed. They're less anchored in physical reality, and the body is not really functioning all that well, and you know you're ready to go. So all of a sudden we have, in the first group of people, we have 100,000 people in one big conglomerate, because we have a lot of people all over the planet. So you can't just say one here and one there, because you're going to have something that's going to be a group, probably. A small group, 100,000 people is a very small group. So we got 100,000 people all of a sudden who leave and take the body with them. Now, has anybody ever given any consideration to the calamity and chaos that that's going to cause? Because I don't know about you, but anybody else, but I got insurance policies. And one thing that I have also is I have some properties, and I also have a will. I mean, I know the spiritual community is not much into these practical stuff, but I'm one of those who's going through the evolutionary process who also can be very intuitive, but I'm also not stupid. I like to take care of business, all right? So I can tell you one thing, that the one thing, if you have any kind of insurance, or you have a will, if you own property, if you have rights to a book, or you have come up with a modality, or you have created something that is of meaning and you want to make sure it's taken care of and is left to people behind you, well, the last thing that you need to do is to leave this friggin' planet and take your body with you. Because the one thing that is required to claim any of these things or make any differences in regards to if you decide to ascend and leave and take the body with you, they have no proof that you died. And here, in this physical world, you have to have a death certificate. And in order to have a death certificate, and let's be practical, you have to have a body. No body, there's no proof of death, so you're still alive somewhere by law. And if you can imagine that each country has different laws pertaining to wills and to property and insurance policies, and I can tell you one thing, there's not an insurance company on this planet, anywhere on the planet, that's going to pay any kind of life insurance policy that you may have that leaves a policy for your family or your kids. If you've ascended and take the body with you, they're out to lunch. Insurance company is not going to pay. And this is going to create all kinds of legal stuff. All right? So I don't follow based on the ascension predictions and prophecies of others who say, we're going to ascend, and if it's not by taking the body with you, it's not true ascension. That's bullshit. The ascension process can actually happen and be done while the person is still in the physical, and that ascended body can reside in the physical body until it is time for the complete entity to leave. At that point, I have come up with another question. Why would anyone in their right mind who is ascending, who has completed the process here in the physical, and you're 75 years old or 80 years old like me or someone else, why would I want to take this old body with me? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't know where some of you get this shit from when it comes to this ascension process. Do you make it up on the fly, or do you go into some dimension where it's all law, 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 law? It doesn't make sense. So the individual ascension that is taking place for most people will be simply a transition. And that transition that you will have is you will not have to go through the present situation of death and dying as it is predicted on this planet. The reason that I say that is 25 years ago, I had the experience of dying, but I did not end up in a hospital. I was not medicated. And the process of actually physically dying was experienced at the mental, the emotional, the physical level over a period of 3 months. And it was a horrifying experience because there was no medication, but I knew something significant and important was going on. And at the moment that I finally gave up and surrendered, and this is what happens in the death cycle, all right, is the individual who is usually suffering from some debilitating disease or whatever finally surrenders and lets go of the body. I did all that stuff with no medication, without being and having any support, no input, no one else who understood what I was going through. And I didn't talk about it with anybody. And I had to go through it all by myself. And at the moment of leaving, I'm going to share with you my experience. And my experience at that particular point was sitting up all of a sudden after I felt this horrific, I left a piece out here, I'm going to repeat it again, of experiencing a sense of, I give up, that's it, I'm done, let's get it done. Going into the healing room that I had at the time, laying down on the bed and say, that's it, I give up. And the moment I said that, I surrendered. And when I did it, I had a horrific pain in my tailbone. All of my sexual energy, which so many of you keep yapping about as being significant, all right, that you got to express this, you got to do that, you got to have this, and sex is great, and all of that blah, blah bullshit you keep harping about. And what it did was it ran up my spinal column into my head. I sat up, looked around, then I got up. I'm standing by the table, and I am upset. Pissed would be the word I would describe it. And I'm sharing this with you because I think it's important to understand ascension is going to be an individual process. It's not going to be true ascension exists only as someone who takes the body with them. That is the most impractical method of ascension. It's going to create more complications, and the difficulties with families left behind afterwards. It's ridiculous to even think that the evolutionary process is going to manifest in that way. And I remember getting up and looking down at my body, and I'm saying, I went through all this stuff for 3 months, the misery, the agony, the fear, the terror, and everything else that I went through. And the whole process of actually leaving the body actually takes 5 seconds or less. That's how pissed I was. But I'm going to leave it off there. And over the years, because I have a lot of contacts over the world, and I've been here a long time, folks. Okay, anything that any of you have experienced, I've already done 25 years ago, and I don't need to go through all of that stuff again. Some of the stuff you're experiencing now, I went through it a long time ago. I'm what they call a first waver, but I'm a different first waver in the sense that I came here to experience everything that you were going to experience in the next few generations 30 years ago. So that I could be here later on to clue you in, hopefully, as to what's going to happen. And Ascension is not going to happen through Ascension by taking the body with you. And that's where I disagree, and that's not the right word. Scratch that word. That's where I differ from some of the opinions you're hearing from other people. So, standing by that body of mine and realizing this is it. But to make a long story short, I had to go to the bathroom, so I had to get back in the body. It took me 2 or 3 weeks to get oriented. But after that experience, what happened is I had another experience, and you have to remember this took place 25 years ago. So at that point, my consciousness was not the same as it is now. It was, in some ways, quite primitive if I make a comparison to who I am now as an individual. So what happened is it was about a month later, I'm on the healing table because that was my favorite spot to meditate on occasion, and I was there. And I'm going to edit this experience down because this will give you a clue as to what's happening. This is just my experience. There will be variations of this experience to everybody, so don't take what I'm saying as yours is nullified because mine is truer. That's not the case. I'm just giving you the experience in general terms of the ascension process as it is going to happen. Not like some say it's going to happen. All right? And what happened was I'm meditating, and all of a sudden I felt a very, very warm burning sensation, hot in my belly button. I actually thought it was going to pop right out of my belly, to make a long story short. And then what happened was, over the next 4 hours, this experience took. All right? What happened was I had a warm liquid feeling. If you've ever watched the mercury go up in a thermometer as the sun's shining on it, well, that's exactly what it felt like. I could feel this warm liquid going down one leg, and it took like half an hour, 45 minutes to get to one leg. And I'm just laying there like fully aware, fully focused, fully attentive as to what's going on, no fear, nothing. And it went down one leg, and then it went down the other leg, and then it started moving up just like liquid all through the body. And when I got to the head, and there I am, and I'm immersed in this feeling of liquid light completely filling my body. And at that point, it began to vibrate and radiate energy. And at that point, another me lifted out of the physical body with full awareness, full consciousness, senses, feeling, smell, taste, touch, feel, all of those intact, lifted out with this other light body, as some people like to call it, with full awareness, full consciousness, in this beautiful radiant body, all right, which I could feel, which was alive, which was so much more alive than the body that I exited, all right, and it radiated there. Like I said, it took 4 hours to get to this point, and it stayed in this other body for at least 5 to 10 minutes. And then the vibration settled, lessened, and I slowly drifted back into the body. Now, based on that fact, I believe I ascended. But the ascension was not complete because in my contract of what I came to do was to facilitate ascension while still in the body, but stay in the body to demonstrate and share to the collective. And I'm not on an ego trip here, all right? Because I've since connected with other people who have done the same thing over the years, similar to mine, and I know they're doing the same thing. So they are adding to the collective the ascension process as it's going to happen. So for me, at one point, I actually thought I was going to ascend and take the body with me, but I no longer believe that because I know it's not true. What I do believe is the moment of ascension takes place like that. And that whole process that I went through of death and dying is eliminated, and it's going to be eliminated for other people who are going through that same or similar ascension process. Are you following me with this? So what's going to happen is when it's time for me to ascend, I'm just going to, like getting up from this chair, and I have a room right there, walking from here to there, that's it. And I'm not going to be in this body. I'm going to be in the ascension body, the ascended body, fully aware, fully conscious, and fully knowing. And you know what? Nicole actually believes the same thing. She's done an evolutionary chart on me. And she actually mentioned this to me about 4 or 5 years ago, and I didn't think that was, well, kind of kosher or agree with her by that much. But I've since had experiences to validate that. And I believe the variations of this are exactly the way it's going to go for a whole pile of other people, eliminating the death experience as it is experienced by normal conscious people. And when they leave in the ascended process, they're going to leave in the same fashion that I've just described in general terms. Because you're going to have, say, 100,000 people in one group, and then the next time you have 400,000 or 500,000 people, and all of these people leave and take the body with them, you're going to have ultimate chaos on this planet and legal manifestation, and I don't believe the evolutionary process is going to do it that way. I just don't buy it, all right? Look at it this way. When in primitive times, you go back around the time of Jesus and other people who have done the ascension process, you didn't have all of this legality. You didn't have the thing with property. You didn't have the thing with intellectual rights. I mean, come on, folks, let's be realistic here, all right? Every one of us has something we want to leave behind for someone else. You don't just want to bugger off, take your body with you, and then be sitting there for 10 years going through legal ramifications of who gets what and what goes where, and suddenly you've lost everything that you built in your lifetime. You can't even pass it on to family members. If you think you don't own nothing or you don't have something, everybody has something that they want to leave behind, all right? Do you want to tie it up in that way because there's no body? There's no bodies, there's no proof you're dead. It's that simple. What I do believe also is this, to add this in. Because of the molecular structure, all right, and the cellular changes that have been taking place within the body physical while you're going through this ascension process, what will happen is after the appropriate time, and this will be discovered later on. I'm looking a few years down the road here. What will happen is there will not be any burial means necessary. There won't be a body to bury because you won't need to do that, because what will happen over a gradual period of time is what will happen is you will have a body left after the person has ascended, but in the past, what would happen is it would disintegrate quickly. Now what will happen is you won't have to go through cremation, you won't have to go to a funeral and get buried. because literally in a few days after the person has left the body will disintegrate on its own, according to wherever they are on the planet and whatever the Ascension program or plan has dictated for that particular culture or race or society or whatever belief systems. Now, doesn't this make sense? I mean, doesn't it? I mean, the evolutionary process is working with us. Although there are many times when you think it's working against you, it's not. Anything that's happening during the evolutionary process is to the benefit and overall benefit. If we're having difficulty with it, it's because we're resisting and we're fighting it, the process, and we're trying to do it our way, or we're trying to control it. This is why I say when I hear people talk about narcissists, we're all narcissists. We're all control freaks. We all want it our way. We're all narcissists, so let's join the party, and let's all ascend as narcissists. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So, anyway, as I was saying, this is a nothing video. It's just an old guy speculating. I'm fun doing it, but I'm speculating. Well, not really. A lot of the information I've given is going to make a lot of sense to a lot of people, and it's going to resonate with them, and they're going to know that I know stuff that is applicable to what's going based on the evolutionary process as it's unfolding at this particular point. So, remember, what I say is just what I say. Other people will say what they want to say, but I wanted to give you something with some practicality to it, with some simplicity, and some sincerity when I say it. Have a great day, everybody. This was a fun one.